Welcome to iTTV. My name is Mr. Gurudev and I am your science teacher. The title of this lesson is Personal Protective Equipment. When we go into the lab, there are many dangerous chemicals in it. We have acids, which we have learned are corrosive. We have metals like mercury, which are liquid that can absorb into your skin and poison you. We have gases that, if inhaled, can make you nauseous and cause you to vomit. We have a lot of chemicals that could possibly, if entering your eye, cause you to lose your eyesight. Do you know what these chemicals are? Do you know all their dangers? To avoid any accident or any injury in the lab, we have a lot of protective equipment. Do you know what these protective equipments are, and do you know their function? You need to know all the different types of protective equipment we have in the lab, their function, and how these pieces of equipment will make sure that you avoid any serious injury or damage to yourself when you're in the lab. Personal protective equipment. Safety in science lab. Safety in laboratories and science rooms is a key aspect that must be taken to protect those working in the lab and the science laboratory against any accidents. Some of the possible accidents in the laboratory and the science room are fire, explosion, electric shock, gas leak, and chemical leakage. The safety of the lab and the science room is the responsibility of principals, head teachers, science teachers, lab support staff, and students themselves. The task of science teachers becomes more challenging when faced with a group of inexperienced, skilled and unskilled students about what to do in the lab and the science laboratory. The main protective equipment that we need to use when we are in the lab that will help us be safe. Remember, the key is to be safe, to avoid accidents. One of the key protective equipments is the lab coat. The lab coat should be made from absorbent material, which means it can absorb the chemical very quickly. So normally we use cotton. You will notice that most lab coats that have been used have stains and marks on them. So lab coats do need to be washed regularly to avoid the chemical staying in the material. We need eye protection. When we are in a lab, anything can easily jump into our eye. Plus also, students try to remember that lab table has been exposed to a lot of chemicals over time. Which means that when you put your hand on the table, there is a very big chance that some chemical is on it, and if you accidentally touch your eye, that chemical will enter your eye. When you open bottles, it's very easy for a drop of acid or alkali to just fly, and for some reason it will always find your eye, and you're going to have to wash your eye or possibly even go to an eye hospital. So that is the function of eye protection. To avoid chemicals, avoid chemicals entering the eye. We need to wear gloves. Like I said earlier, the lab coat will cover you till here, but it will not cover your hand. The lab coat is here, the glove completes the coverage. Again, when you're touching the tables, you're holding chemicals, you are not sure if the outside of a bottle has got acid on it because we can't spot it. Yep. When you're holding chemicals in your hand, you don't want that chemical to absorb in through your skin. Example, mercury. So, gloves, firstly, need to be resistant to chemicals, meaning you don't want your glove to react with chemicals in the lab. Secondly, we don't want the chemicals, so we want to avoid chemicals coming into contact with our skin. So we have the lab coat, eye protection, gloves. We have foot protection. Things in the lab can fall down, and also there may be a spillage. Something may have spilled in the lab, and if you're walking around, it will get under your shoes. So in the lab, normally what we do is we use shoes that have an area in the front to protect our toes, and also we put a plastic coating around it so that the shoe is not exposed to any chemicals that may be on the floor in a laboratory, to prevent damage to the foot. Yeah? Emergency eye wash, very important. If anything enters your eye, you need to wash the eye out immediately for about 10 minutes. Non-stop, just spray the distilled water onto your eye so that it cleans, and then of course you must immediately go to an eye hospital to prevent, to rinse the eye out if chemical enters the eye. We also have a shower in a bigger lab, so if anything spilled onto you, you should also stand under the emergency shower for about 10 minutes to make sure the chemical is washed away. We have a fume hood. So any experiment we do in the lab that produces a gas or any vapor that is dangerous or toxic should be done in a fume hood. The fume hood will have a fan at the top, a ventilation fan that will suck all the bad or dangerous vapors out. So no one in the lab is going to be exposed to those gases. Also, we keep chemicals that are volatile. Volatile means can evaporate very quickly, change into gas very easily. These chemicals also should be kept in the fume hood so that if they do evaporate, which they will, the vapors that are produced are extracted, taken away through the ventilation system. So, for experiments that produce toxic gas or volatile chemicals, we keep them inside there. We have other pieces of equipment in the lab that are also important to us, like ventilation chambers, special areas where we keep biological material. We'll discuss all of those as we go on through the lesson. Lab coat must be used properly when performing work in a related laboratory. All other clothing such as scarves, shirt collars, neckties should be carefully wrapped to protect them from damage. Laboratory coats should be comfortable to use and easy to open in the event of accidents or chemical contamination. Eye protection must be used when performing chemical or hazardous work. It should be clean from any dirt and will not interfere with sight. Gloves. Gloves are a device used when doing experiments that involve a hazard to the hands, such as, number 1, hot samples and cryogenic low temperature fluids. Number 2, handling corrosive chemicals. Examples of commonly used gloves are rubber gloves, foot protection. Foot protection is used to protect from Number 1, stabbing the foot with sharp objects and falling objects. Number 2, to avoid chemical spills. And number 3 is needed when working in slippery areas. Examples of commonly used foot protectors include safety shoes and the shoe cover. Surgical mask. To prevent any biological particles from the mouth and nose to spread by the wearer to the environment. Face masks work to protect the nose and mouth from hazardous air particles and dust. These masks can only filter large particles in the air but cannot protect against chemical fumes and most biological aerosols such as virus and bacteria. Face protection. Face shield provides comprehensive protection to the face and is used when handling liquid-type chemicals. This mask does not protect the eyes from UV rays. Therefore, these tools should be worn together with safety glasses or goggles. Before applying a face mask, make sure the front of the mask is clean from any dirt. Emergency eye wash. It is specially used to rinse and wash eyes with chemicals. In the event of a splash of chemical into the eye, make sure the victim is taken to a nearby washroom and help the victim open their eyes to rinse for 10 to 20 minutes. The victim is advised not to rub his or her eyes. It is forbidden to use water if there are foreign objects such as glass in the eye. The student should be prevented from trying to remove the foreign object. Emergency shower. Recommended to clean and rinse parts of the body clothing that was exposed to chemicals in large quantities or high concentrations. Pull down the opening button. Make sure the water that comes out moistens the body parts or clothing that was exposed to chemicals. In the event of a chemical spill on the skin, make sure that the water flows for 10 to 20 minutes. Bring the victim to a doctor immediately. Make sure the emergency shower is clean and in good condition. It is advisable that the inspections be conducted at least once a month. Fume hood. The use of fume hood is to protect students from inhaling harmful chemicals. It is important in the laboratory to conduct experiments that release flammable, toxic, corrosive, and odorless vapors. The function of the fume hood is to remove polluted air out of the laboratory and to drain clean air into the laboratory. Biohazard Safety Cabinet. Biohazard safety cabinets are an effective primary tool in controlling infectious agents. The use of this type of cabinet depends on the level of safety of the infectious agent handled by the student. Laminar airflow cabinet. There are two types of laminar, namely horizontal and vertical. Both are not biological safety cabinets. 1. Horizontal laminar water flow. This type of laminar only provides protection to the product. Avoid laminar use when dealing with harmful microorganisms. 2. Vertical laminar water flow. Used as a clean area for any preparation that does not involve microorganisms such as food sampling, plate drying, tissue culture, etc. Like the horizontal laminar types, avoid using them if workers handle pathogens or other harmful microorganisms. Why do we have to obey the rules while in the science lab? The science room rules must be adhered to when in the science lab for assurance of safety before, during, and after activities. The importance of personal protective equipment. When working with a variety of corrosive, toxic, and hazardous chemicals, a practical method of self-protection is extremely important. The main objective is to prevent accidents. There are some cases that require the use of personal protective equipment, example when working with harmful chemicals. Questions. What are some of the things you cannot do if you are heating up a beaker? So students, when you're heating up a beaker, you must remember all the protective equipment aspects and the safe handling aspects. You cannot touch the beaker with your hands. You must make sure you're wearing protective goggles or protective eyepiece. Make sure your lab coat is on. Make sure there is nothing around that area that could be affected by the heat from the Bunsen burner, something that might be explosive or flammable. So these are the things you must take into consideration when doing experiments in the lab. So what is the answer to this question? A. Take the beaker by using your hands. B. Take the beaker by using clamps. C. Test the liquid temperature inside the beaker. D. All of the above. So the answer here is A. Do not take the beaker by using your hands. You will burn your hands. Question 2. An eye protection device, goggles, is required when the experiment is exposed to. So you're wearing goggles, you got to understand something can fly into your eye. You want to prevent something from entering your eyes. So what is the answer here? The answer here is A, to avoid flying particles. Yes. B, dangerous light such as ultraviolet radiation. Yes, we have to protect our eyes from that. C, gas and vapors. Exactly. We don't want gas and vapors entering our eye. D, all of the above. So the answer here is D, all of the above. Which of the following is a function of the fume hood protection? Remember, the fume hood is there to prevent any dangerous gases being exposed. We want to take the gas out from the lab so that we are not exposed to it. So the answer here is C. Very good. Protects against toxic volatile substances. Four. Which protection tool should you use before starting the experiment? When you're doing an experiment, all of the ones that we mentioned, the lab coat, eye protection, gloves, foot protection, these are the things that you must make sure you have on before starting your experiment. So the answer here is D, all of the above. Question 5. What is the minimum amount of time required to wash eyes that has been exposed to harmful chemicals? Remember, when we do our emergency eye wash, you should wash the eye for anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. So the answer here, C, 10 minutes. So remember, when you're going into a lab, protective equipment. We need it to make sure nothing goes wrong in the lab. Please understand, students, in a lab, anything can happen. Yes, and all the things that we are telling you about, to wear a lab coat, to wear eye protection, to wear the gloves, to wear foot protection, to make sure to know where the emergency eye wash is, to do experiments in the fume hood. We are telling you this because there have been millions of accidents in labs since we've been doing science experiments. Every time there's an accident in a lab, we learn another way to protect ourselves. So make sure you are protected when you're in the lab so that you can avoid the injuries that have occurred to all the scientists before you. Don't be like them. That's all for this lesson. Thank you very much.